Hello good people of YouTube and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to begin painting Baldwin. It's going to take a while. He's a big giant and to finish him will probably take several YouTube videos. I'll be breaking him down into sensible parts that could be tackled. So we'll probably start with the skin and then we'll look at the patches on his clothing, how big pieces of clothing can be broken into smaller areas of detail, and then we'll look at other things like the weapons, things that are around the belts, various other bits and pieces that will all help add visual flair for what is a very large model on the battlefield. So I just wanted to take a quick look before I get the paints out at some of the other giants that I've started and not necessarily finished. This was the original Forge World giant that I did actually have years ago. I ended up selling it painted and then regretted that immediately, so hunted for another one which I picked up off eBay. It was a bit of a rescue job. I've actually zenithal primed this and started to paint him again, but as you can see I only got as far as putting some contrast paints on the face. This is probably how we'll start painting Baldwin. Start with the head, the facial features, do the arms, any other bits of skin that might be showing through rips or tears, and then move on to the clothing. I also picked up a later edition of the Forge World Giant. I think this might have been called a bone grinder giant, if memory serves me well. And again, you can see there how I've painted the skin. I've broken the fabric into smaller patches, bits of fur, leather, cloth, and I've deliberately chosen colors that kind of work off each other. Again, this isn't finished by any stretch of the imagination, and I did start painting this before contrast paints were a thing. So this guy has been painted in a primer, which I think was probably grey. He then had several brown washes applied before he was detailed, before I picked out the various areas with different colours, and then brown washes were applied again. Now that I've got a healthy collection of contrast paints, when I do get around to finishing him off, I will be using some of those contrast paints as glazes to help enhance the colour on that particular giant. And just to kind of illustrate the point, when it comes to large giants and how to tackle them, I just wanted to run through quickly what I've done with these giants. Again, you know, the painting standard on these, it was okay enough to do a product shot. I did paint these years ago. I hope my painting skills have improved since then, but this particular one was painted just to have a bit of punch on the battlefield. The vibrant yellow, the reds and the blues all playing off each other, and all the little details that were picked out on the front there. I did use some very kind of bright colors with that giant because I did want to kind of give it some punch. The other giant, the other Imperial giant that I painted at roughly the same time, and I'm going to be careful with this because these pumpkins that I've put on the base aren't actually glued down, I've just left them there. But yeah, if we take the sword arm away for a second, you can see on this giant I actually went as far as painting some motifs on large areas of cloth. So there we've got a sort of a cross on a white bit of canvas, which could be a sail. from a ship that's been used. It's repeated there, and then I took some of the kind of iconography and imagery that I'd seen used on Empire banners and just painted fragments of fabric to look like they were repurposed banners, and then bits of clothing, handkerchiefs, just anything that looked like it might add a little bit of interest to the model, which obviously on a wargaming table is going to be viewed from a distance. I think there's probably just the corner of a wing there, which I painted as well. So I'll be approaching Baldwin the Pious in the same way. I just wanted to show you these before we got cracking, because although I don't actually go to the trouble of planning out paint schemes, I tend to have a general idea of what it is I want to achieve. With Baldwin here, obviously I'll be going for colours that I'll end up using in my Bretonnian sort of peasant bowmen and men-at-arms, but I do want the odd area of fabric or something to stand out, so I will probably look for bits that I could that I could use to create the sort of a section of a flag or a banner or something, just to add a bit of detail. In fact, I've put a flag around his belt there. Rope will obviously be sort of sandy colour, yellows, that kind of thing. We've got a barrel and also his club, which is kind of the branch of a tree. Just move over here quickly to show you that when I did that before, that I was using some quite bright, almost white paint to highlight various areas on the bark in particular. I have since sort of improved that painting technique, but it just gives you an idea of what you can do on such a big model to create interest and break up what would otherwise be a very big area of flat colour. So, as I said, neither of the Forge World giants that I've done are finished. These two giants were painted as product shots. This I've painted since, so this isn't actually the hand that was on the model in the product shot. So I've just dropped that on. It's not finished. I've got various arm options that I'm still painting up, and I've got various head options as well that I'm still painting up. But I just wanted to take a quick look at those before we clear them off the painting table and get on with our step-by-step painting of Baldwin the Pious. And as I said, this will probably happen over several videos, and in this video I will start by applying a contrast paint to all the areas of skin, a pale flesh tone there that I want to use on that one. So we'll start with that and see how it goes. To start with, I'm going to build up a flesh tone using these three speed paints from Army Painter: Warrior Skin, Crusader Skin and Peachy Flesh. I've got some poured out on a plate there. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually starting to run because my desk is at a slight angle. I normally paint on a piece of glass, but then that's not going to show up well for the camera. So we'll see how we get on with this. And I'm just going to build up the paint layers on the skin a little at a time, probably using some wet blending techniques, which is basically just working the three different shades in together onto the skin before any of the paint has had chance to dry. It's a big model, so in many respects it's more like painting terrain than it is actually painting a small human figure. So we'll crack on with the skin and see how it goes. So I'm starting with a bit of peachy flesh, which I'm working over the primer, the Zenithal Prime, quite generously. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't pool anywhere. As I said, this is quite a big model, so it is more like painting a terrain piece than it is a standard figure. And once you get used to it, you can start working those colours up with a bit of confidence. But this is just, as I said, Army Painter, speed paint, peachy flash. And once I've got this done all over the head, I can start to darken up some of the other areas where it meets the fabric of the clothing round the collar. We can get some shadow enhanced under the chin. I'm not being too careful at this stage around things like the lips and the teeth or the eyes, because I'll just be building up layers of paint as we go along. I really can't stress enough that on a model this size, you need to be thinking the same way that you would think when you're painting a piece of terrain. Lots of big flat surfaces that will benefit from multiple layers of different colours and different shades worked in over the model to create areas of interest. You can go in afterwards with a thinner detailing brush. This is just a flat brush that I picked up. I think this one is by Green Stuff World, but I don't have any particular favourites. I'm quite a messy painter as well, which was something I found ironic, having written a book on painting and modelling. I am actually quite a messy painter. I like to get stuck in and just work in quite a loose and free style. So that's looking more or less how I want it as a first coat. Just work a bit more around the back of the neck where I've got some creases in the skin. I don't know how well that's showing on camera because I can't really see very well because it's obscured by the tripod that I've stood it in. It looks as though the skin tone that you're seeing on the camera there might actually appear to be more yellow or brown than it is as I'm looking at it. Here it does look like quite a sort of conventional pale flesh tone with a little bit of warmth in it. So that's the first coat of peachy flesh on there. I've just dipped into a slightly darker one. This might be Crusader skin here. Again, I don't know how that's going to show up on the camera, especially with these bright lights that I'm painting under, but that's providing me with a nice bit of shadow, and I'm just working it in, trying to work it in while the peachy flesh is still damp, so that I won't get any sort of tide marks. Try a little bit of the warrior skin under there as well. Right, so I'm going to continue with this paint the flesh on the arms. I'll do it quite quickly, and we'll see how we go. Speeded up like this, the painting of the giant looks pretty easy, but I can assure you it was a very heavy model, and having the camera tripod there as well made the whole process a little bit more awkward. If I bought a giant like this, I would probably paint it in sections before gluing the model together. Messing about with that little bit of time-lapse footage and dubbing in some audio has actually given the speed paint, the contrast paint that I've used, time to dry, and you can see now how that looks as a base coat on Baldwin. I have noticed there are a few splashes and things and areas where obviously the paintbrush has crept over onto different parts of the model. I'm not bothered about that at this stage. It really isn't too much of a worry. You can see down there I've got some splashes on the fabric there. There's some more around the front. If I was going to paint something like this white, then I would get in there with a bit more white primer, some liquid white primer, or just a normal sort of a white acrylic paint, and tidy that up before applying a lighter colour. I probably won't with this model. They'll probably end up being either dark reds or browns, so I'm not too worried at this stage. One thing I have realised though is painting Baldwin on camera is slightly restrictive, and although I was tempted to sort of carry on painting his facial features and build up the highlights on the skin tones, I'm not sure how practical this will be to do it now. So I think what I'm going to do is continue with this video, and I will block in some of the base colours that I want to use elsewhere on the fabric and so on. So we'll try and get a sort of a basic first coat on everything, and see how Baldwin looks when we've built up some of the color layers there. Once he's had pretty much one coat of everything all over, that's the messy part over and done with. I can then get in and tackle some of the more detailed elements. So the next thing I'm looking at is picking some colors, browns or greens or creams or whatever, for his clothing, and some dark brown for the club and the barrel, and obviously some sort of yellow or beige tones for the ropes. So I'll stop filming now. I'll block in a few areas. I'll probably film a couple of sequences so that you can see what I'm doing, and then we'll pick up on that when Baldwin has a bit more colour on him. Okay, to start with, I'm looking at laying down some shades of brown, blocking out various areas on Baldwin and his clothing, and for that I will be using several different shades. I've got Gargrax Sewer, Gorgrunt of Fur and Wildwood, which I use quite often, and also Dark Wood from Army Painter 2.0. I know there were some problems with their earlier range of speed paints, rehydrating when you applied another paint on top, and the two colours kind of bleeding and seeping into each other. I think that problem was solved with the 2.0 range of speed paints, and now I've got quite a lot of these. I'll probably start with the dark wood on the club and maybe the barrel, and then maybe the wildwood and perhaps the Gorgrunt of Fur on some of the fur around the shoes. I also want to put a bit of dark brown on some of the area of fabric here, not on the piece of fabric on the top of his shoulder. I want to keep that fairly light. I'm not sure what it's called. I'll find out at some point. But using darker colours underneath will help lift this piece of fabric off and give Baldwin the Bretonnian look that I'm after. And although I will be painting Baldwin bald, I do have his hairpiece here, and I will probably either use Gorgrunt of fur or something similar to get that started as well. So I haven't forgot about the infamous bowl cut. So yeah, cue the time-lapse photography, and I'll get the paintbrushes out again. Okay, so here I'm using Army Painter Dark Wood Speed Paint to paint the tree trunk club, working from every angle to get between the fingers and apply an even coat, making sure the paint doesn't pool anywhere. Then when I've done that, I move on to the barrel, working between the bits of rope, picking out the wooden detail before moving on to other accoutrements on the belt. Next, I use Citadel Wildwood on some of the thick fur details on the boots, working into all the texture, making sure I get an even coat. I then do some of the wood, barrels and chests and things that I've used on the base before working up round by the shoulders. Right, it's the next morning, and the paint that I put on yesterday evening has had time to dry. Not only did I work through the colours that I showed you earlier, the different shades of brown contrast paint, I also pulled out a bottle of hardened leather, which is an Army Painter speed paint. I've used this on trousers, some parts of the shoes, just to bring in a lighter colour where I felt it was needed. Elsewhere you can see I've used the different shades of dark brown. I've done the club, the barrels on the bases, the fur on the feet. You've seen the time-lapse footage of some of that. You can probably hear some banging. There are builders in next door, so I'm going to keep this segment very short and sweet. I've got this for the next 6 weeks, I think, because they're ripping down walls and doing all sorts. So I will carry on painting Baldwin without videoing everything. I might do a bit more time lapse, but I just quickly want to explain where I'm up to and what I'm doing. I did add some contrast paint onto his bowl cut hairdo, so I went for a slightly watered down Gorgrunt of fur at the top and some wildwood around the edge just to give a base coat. I will be painting in shade and shadow around the underside of that. I can't shade the skin, which I would have done normally if this was a one-piece head sculpt, because the minute you shade the skin underneath the hair, you take the hair off, you've got a tide mark that doesn't make any sense. So I'll be approaching that slightly differently. Obviously also he will be wearing different hairstyles depending on which army he's going to fight in. So very quickly, the other thing I want to point out is you can probably see some of the patches are now grey. They appear light grey. So in addition to the brown that I painted on the model, I also got some Holy White speed paint out, and I'm using that to create some base tones for areas of fabric that will be white, but I'm going to go basically paint up from either grey or cream. I don't want just one shade of white on a huge expanse of cloth up at the top there. So some of the white will be based on cool shades of grey, some white will be based over creams. It's just to give a bit of variation, but from a distance the overall impression will be that the fabric is white. So I'm going to crack on with that. I might do some more time-lapse filming. I'm also going to block in some areas of black and red patches of fabric which I want to tie in with the current old world Bretonnian sort of box art, if you like. I quite like the black and red colours that have been chosen for the re-release of the Bretonnians. So I'm going to use those, but I'll use them sparingly, because I also want Baldwin here to fit into my Chaos Army or my Ogre Kingdoms army. Again, my Ogre Kingdoms, when I get around to painting those, there will be elements of black and red in their paint scheme, so that'll work really well. I'm rushing this a little and trying to keep it short, because this is just a segment to link onto the next bit of video that I'm putting in this particular YouTube video, and I'm conscious of the noise in the background. It's difficult to deal with, but I should be able to do an update this evening which will show the day's progress, and I can cut to that now. Here I'm using Slaughter Red, which is another Army Painter speed paint, and I'm blocking out areas of fabric both above and below the belt. Picking sections that are close together like this helps you create a unified effect, and gives the impression that the giant's clothing is a complete garment. I'm also looking for areas on the trousers, the front and back of the legs, and anywhere else I think suitable that will help the model stand out and create an impact when it's on the wargaming table. Once the Slaughter Red has had time to dry, I then turn to Grim Black, which is another speed paint from Army Painter. Again, I was choosing areas of fabric that I felt would be eye-catching, patches adjacent to the red to help reinforce that link with the Bretonnian colour scheme and vibe. And I was just turning the model in my hands, looking for anywhere that I felt was suitable for a layer of black. Returning to the shoulders and working down the model, I started to block out areas in Pallid Bone, which is an Army Painter speed paint. It's a beige colour which I'm using as a warm shade, on top of which I can highlight in white. So while there's a lull in the building work next door, I just thought I'd do a very quick update of what I've done so far. You can see here that I've added a beige or cream colour on some of the areas that I want white. That was actually Pallid Bone speed paint from Army Painter. I've also used Grim Black, which again is a speed paint from Army Painter. I've got that all over my fingers, as well as where I wanted it on Baldwin. So those are the two main differences there, including also the patches of red that you can see. So three main differences, and that is Slaughter Red, again speed paint from Army Painter. I've also just put a first coat of contrast paint on the hair for my sort of Chaos / Ogre giant, and I've added some black around the base. Now normally I would mount these on a cork with some blue tack and do it all very professionally, but because this is just a base coat that's going on, I literally picked them up, had some paint left over, didn't want to waste it, so slapped it on there, and also I had some red paint left over as well, so I slapped some Slaughter Red on a few of the patches for the hat. So that's the progress so far. Next stages, I think, will be to perhaps paint some green. I'm looking at maybe doing these green or blue, I'm not sure. I've got some bits of fabric that I probably want to paint yellow, just to give them a punch, make it look like they've been made out of heraldry, flags or whatever from an opposing army. So I've got a few bits there that I want to add, and I'll probably look at doing the ropes as well. So I think that's the next thing. So we'll be looking at some more spot colours, painting all the ropes an orange or a yellow base coat, finishing off the trousers and the garments with some more colours, and working our way down to the boots with the shoelaces. I may as well put a coat of silver on there. If I do, I'm likely to use another speed paint from Army Painter. This one here, Broadsword Silver. I might start with that, it depends, because I also quite like this Brazen Copper, and again I might use that for the toe caps just to make them a bit more rustic. I might even do one of each. But there we are, they're firing up again next door. I can hear them clattering, so I will sign off here, do the painting that I said I would do, and come back to you. Whilst painting silver on the steel toe caps and other bits of armour, I realised that the paint looked a bit grey and I might not have shaken the bottle enough, so I'll have to highlight that again later. I spent quite some time painting the ropes on this giant, and the colour I eventually chose was Sand Golem, which is another speed paint from Army Painter. The giant is big and it's heavy and awkward to handle, and I found myself contorting into some very awkward positions in order to try and get to all the areas that I needed to paint. Okay, so we're reaching the end of another day. The builders next door have gotten home and I've got a little bit of peace and quiet. The video so far, which you will have seen by the time we reach this clip, is already about half an hour long, so I didn't want to do too much more in the way of time-lapse photography or anything like that. I'm hoping you've got the gist of it, the process involved, particularly if you're new to painting or new to painting a model this size. The process is involved in just blocking out. As you can see from the model, there are still some areas that are white, primer. They need covering with colour to create the final effect that I'm after. This patch on the stomach here, which is quite a big one, I'll probably choose a yellow base colour for that. Basically I want to get Baldwin into a state now where everything has at least one coat of paint in some form or other, and I'm going to do that off camera. So that's about it for now. The next thing that I want to do, in addition to blocking out the last remaining bits of fabric and material, is have a look at the base. Normally I use Vallejo thick mud or earth texture. I'm not sure what colour I'll use yet. I've got quite a few to choose from, so I've just grabbed these to give you an idea of what I've got in mind. I will be applying that to the base in and around the little bits of detail and around his feet. So by the time I pick up the camera again, I'm hoping that Baldwin will pretty much be covered in a base coat on every part of the model. So that's about it really. Once that's done, I'll give you a final look, and we'll probably close this YouTube video down after that, and then we can start looking at the detailing and the highlighting that comes once all the base coats are in place. You can see there that I'm also progressing with the different hairstyles. So we've got the pineapple ponytail, which has had a coat of grim black speed paint, and we've got the bowl cut, which again I've just applied a couple of different shades to. All of that will be highlighted in a subsequent video. But for now, I'm just going to concentrate off camera on getting the rest of these patches of primer covered with something, and I will be back when that is done. Right, so I'm now getting ready to wrap this video up. I've been at this for a couple of days on and off. Baldwin now has most of his surface blocked out in one colour or another. I've just left the flag there because I haven't decided what to do with that yet. There's a little shield on his shoulder. There's one or two sort of pouches or little kind of wrapped up bundles that I've not made a decision on yet. A couple of things which haven't worked out the way I hope they might. I've gone for a grey on the mallet, but I've used a mix of Gravelord grey and this ashen stone, neither of which took particularly well, but what I had in mind was something more like the old Games Workshop blue grey. I can't remember what it was called, whether it was a shadow grey or something, and it had a slight blue tint to it. I do have a colour which is similar. This is Vallejo somber grey, and there's this blue tint to it. So the mallet, and also there's a stone, a boulder down there. I will give those a single coat of that, and then probably apply some speed paint, a grey speed paint as a wash over the top. So that hasn't quite worked out the way I wanted. Everything else is pretty good. I did mention earlier that this looks a little dark. I don't think I gave the broadsword silver a good enough shake, so that was actually quite dark. I will probably dry brush over the top with a lighter silver, and then what I'm going to do when I've got that looking more metallic is probably use this brazen copper then to just kind of knock it back down to something more rustic. So apart from that, there's lots of creams ready to be painted white or made to look like kind of beige, sort of, I don't know, I don't want to call them bandages, but they're bindings, aren't they? So ideas are forming, things are coming together. This is always the point, I think, when a model looks its worst. You spend all this time prepping a model, building it. In this case, I've sculpted Baldwin and put him together and given him a zenithal prime, and then when it comes to blocking out colors, it always looks absolutely horrendous. It's perfectly normal. It's just part of the whole process, but there is always this point where in my experience, a model looks terrible before it looks better, and that's not me being overly critical or anything. It's just the way this process works. Now, of course, if Baldwin was a regular size 28mm miniature and I'd zenithal primed him and put some contrast paints on or put some speed paints on, he'd be looking pretty good by now, and I'd be saying things like, at this point you could stop, and he's you know, kind of table ready, and you know, it's a good tabletop standard, and that would be true. It would be for most 28mm miniatures, but you know, Baldwin is the size of an Action Man or a G.I. Joe. I mean, basically he is huge, and he doesn't look good with a zenithal prime and some blocking out. It needs the extra work, as I said earlier in this video, the kind of work that you would put into creating a terrain piece, and that's, I think, something that's crucial about these larger miniatures, particularly giants. So we're getting there. I'm quite pleased with the way the rope has turned out. You will see that the staining and the way that the paint has kind of settled on the rope is very patchy. It's irregular. Initially, you might think, "Oh, that's terrible. You should have an even coat over the top." But actually, no. This is exactly what we want, because when you start highlighting over the top of this, the fact that some of the paint has settled in slightly thicker areas, you know, and you've got this staining and this uneven colour, it'll make the rope look a lot better. you get some highlights on there and it'll look like you've spent ages mixing and blending and achieving this effect, when actually it's just happened through the course of painting the model as quickly as I've done. So I've also applied some mud texture to the base. It's still wet, and I am, as I'm moving Baldwin around, squashing it and pressing it down and with my thumb, and so I will just double check that before I walk away from Baldwin and leave him to dry. The earth texture on the base will normally need to dry overnight. It may take 24 hours on a base this size, where it's been sort of put down fairly thick in places. So I will be leaving Baldwin now for that base to dry. When the earth texture is dry, I might look at doing some washes, particularly on areas like here where I want to bring out the features and the shadows, all the recesses and things. These are techniques that I will be looking at in the next video. The other thing that I will be doing as well now is detailing all the individual patches of fabric, and again I will tackle them one patch at a time and take short videos as I do one particular piece, like for example painting white over the grey there, or then painting white over a cream bit of fabric. So there's lots of stuff on here now that I can start tackling and doing these little sort of video clips to explain how I would highlight and add interest to all these different areas. The model itself is big, as I've said, so the last thing I want to do when I do paint a giant as big as this, the last thing I want to do is get stuck in and, for example, say, right, I'm going to paint the red fabric, and then you go and you highlight and finish off and detail every piece of red fabric on the giant, and then you move to the black fabric and do all the black. In my experience, that's a recipe for disaster, because you just get yourself in a huge mess, and then you'll start painting some of the brown, and then you'll find you missed a red piece out, or you've forgotten a black piece. So I tend to just break the giant down into smaller areas. For example, you know, doing the top of the shoulders and the back. So you look at that piece of fabric there, and you paint one area and you finish it and get it how you like it. Then you move on to another patch of fabric and you paint that. You put on a mid-tone if you need one, you highlight it, you use some ink washes or oils to tone down some areas or create shadow. All these techniques I'll look at, but you paint that and then you move on to the next one. And it might be that you then repeat yourself with a color or use a different color, but it's just one patch at a time. So that's how I'll be tackling Baldwin in the next video. So just for a recap here, to go over what I did, I started off doing the flesh, and I was using speed paints, warrior skin, crusader skin, and peachy flesh. I then moved on to some of the dark brown areas, the leathers and things like that, using wildwood, Gore-grunter fur, Garagax sewer, and dark wood. So 3 contrast paints from Games Workshop from their Citadel colour range, and another speed paint. I also picked up a hardened leather and began to work that into some of the lighter areas. That's a really nice colour. Then when I'd done that, I painted Slaughter red, Grim black, and Holy white as base colours for the patches that I'm going to paint in colours that reflect the kind of Bretonnian vibe that we've got going on at the moment in the old world. The boots I've already touched on, the metallic toe caps there, and what I intend to do with those. Now the areas of light fabric that I'm eventually going to work up to a white. Obviously I used the Holy white for the grey, but then there was pallid bone and sand golem, which I think I used the sand golem on the ropes. I also picked up a howling sand as well, which was a slightly greener or beige looking colour, and also this malignant green, which is kind of a rotting flesh. And all those have been painted in various different places to give me something to work up to. So in the next video, I will be doing that. We will be bringing these different shades up to white, but you'll have a cool white and a warm white. So close up, there'll be some variation, but from a distance, the overall impression will be, you know, that area of the garment is white. So yeah, still lots to do, but as I said, I'm going to leave the textured earth and the kind of Vallejo mud texture that I put on there, the diorama effects. I'm going to leave that to dry because it's still wet and it's still quite thick, and then we'll start tackling individual areas in the next video. I'll be using a variety of different techniques, including dry brushing. I'll be wet blending and building up layers of thin coat, just depending on what each area requires. And then, of course, with things like fur, the kind of fur texture that I've done here requires each individual sort of point of fur to be highlighted, so we'll be looking at that. I've got some other fur texture here, which it works really well with dry brushing. And then, of course, we've got the bark effects to deal with on the club. So that's it. I think since the last segment of video as well, I've also used now this was a burnished red that I've used for the hairband that ties up that pineapple ponytail. I've used burnished red in a couple of other places on the model as well. I think it was the belt that ties the shoe up there. So we've got rope tying that shoe up and a belt tying that shoe up. So he's got his different hairstyle. I haven't done anything more yet with the hat. I will do that off camera, so I'll bring that up to the same level of finish as Baldwin is here. But this really is it. I think it's going to be a 40-minute long video by the time I've knitted all these bits together. But that is Baldwin, more or less, with everything blocked out in a base coat. So my next video, as I said, I will be picking different areas of the model, and I will be talking about how you work them up in a series of highlights where they need highlighting. Some bits might not need any highlighting, and I'll be looking at using washes as well to tie things together and tone things down. So it's been a bit of a trek to get this far, particularly with the builders next door and all the other things I've got going on in my life at this particular point in time, particularly with my health. I don't want to bang on about that, but that is a factor that is kind of limiting my capabilities right now. Anyway, I'm really enjoying getting stuck into Baldwin. I will also probably flick through a couple of my medieval history books or some old Games Workshop publications to have a look at what kind of motif or heraldry I might want to put on that yellow piece of fabric there, and also the flag that's dangling from the belt loop. So lots of fun stuff to do in the next video. It might take 2 or 3 videos to actually get Baldwin to a point where he's finished. I'm breaking off for tonight now with this. I do have some other bits and pieces I want to do YouTube videos for. There's some Dead Man Hand stuff that I'm doing, Dead Man's Hand, which is the kind of Old West kind of skirmish game. I've got videos for that. I'll be adding some more videos this week to that. I've also got some other old world armies that I want to dust off. I haven't painted any of them yet, but I've spent months building them since they came out. So I will I'll probably put together a video showing one of my all-time favorite factions that I haven't even started painting yet, but more about that when it happens. For now, that's it. Thanks ever so much for watching. Please like this video if you haven't already. Please subscribe. It really does help with those algorithms, and it helps me know that, you know, I'm producing videos that you're interested in watching. So thanks again for sticking with me for this video. I'm looking forward to the next video where I start putting some detail on Baldwin, and I'll do my best to get that sorted in between all the noise and the ruckus from next door. Take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.